This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
So are we a quorum then?
So we actually are. So let's see, I have 704. We have a quorum, and this is breaking news because as of today, it sounds like Bob Barkham wants to step away from the committee. Perfectly fine. I've only met him, I think, just a couple of times now. Nice guy, and it sounds like he's been with the committee for quite a long time. So much appreciated there. But that leaves us with 6 committee members per my count. So technically, we do have a quorum now based on the 4 that we see here. So that's not bad. We can actually officially post minutes and I guess conduct official business if we really wanted to. That said, if we are left with an even number, if anyone would like to share or advertise or recommend any interested folks who are looking to join the committee or want to get involved, of course, feel free. And I think it's always recommended to have an odd number just in case we ever needed to vote on something that helps make a tiebreaker. So we'll operate as is until we hear otherwise.
We had spoken to one of our neighbors.
Yeah, Libby
Baldwin, who's actually an engineer, which I think if we can convince her may be a good
civil engineer.
Civil engineer, so it may help with this phase of design.
That'd be a great resource. Absolutely. I was actually hoping to ask Dan some questions about, expectations during this RFQ and engineering phase that we could potentially be moving into in the future. Of course, he's tied up for the evening, but he's in that line of work as well. So, any familiarity on this sort of subject is, of course, valued. So yeah, feel free. And we could always get in touch, talk casually, introduce her to what's been happening, or make it official and have another meeting. Flexible either way.
Yep.
All right. So, that's essentially what I had on the membership side. Summary side, big thanks to, of course, Mark and Ellen. You guys helped get the grant application across the finish line, which was due February 1st for the latest and greatest Mass Trails opportunity. I think the result was something like 150 days post-submission date, somewhere around there, but I think we're estimating July or August we'll hear back. I don't know.
I think it's specifically end of June.
Oh, at June. Okay, so earlier than I thought. That would be great. I'm unsure as to whether or not, what our chances are. I've heard good things from a lot of folks saying that, because we are a key piece, we're trying to fill the gap, that we'd be prioritized. If that's the case, excellent. But we received a Mass Trails grant last year, so unsure, but we'll see.
So just to update, I think what I said before, I had spoken to Amanda Lewis, who's the program coordinator, the grants coordinator, and she sort of said we're not that likely to get it.
Yeah.
Because we try not to give to the same community 2 years in a row, but putting it in was a good idea. It sort of allows us to fine tune the grant for the following year and push the process ahead. But she didn't want to be too encouraging.
Yeah.
Also, this thing about the land, all the legal work wasn't completed.
Acquisition.
Yeah.
The acquisition, and that's also an issue.
But if we can get
not a surprise. Okay. And admittedly, so I did email Ed about that just to see if he had any late breaking news on the status there. I don't know. I don't have an update. And the latest information was that he had a draft available between the legal folks and Pioneer Valley Railroad. I think I distributed that to the committee. If you haven't seen it, obviously feel free to let me know. I think the best we can do is review it, see if we see any low-hanging fruit that needs correcting, provide input. But I've not heard if it has since moved forward, changed, if there's been any progress. But that's all I know on the actual acquisition phase at the moment.
I don't remember seeing it.
Did you send that out a while ago?
It was probably a while ago. Yeah, probably at least a month ago or so.
Thanks.
But I can, of course, send it again to the group if you don't see it. I'll make a note for that, and I'll check it in a bit to see. And if you haven't seen it, I'll send it again. Let's see, follow up.
I quite recently saw what appeared to be the draft of a rail banking agreement. Are we talking about the same document?
Yes.
That's it. That's what I was thinking of.
Okay, I think that was quite recent, unless I misunderstood something. And I just glanced at it and realized that one thing I have, despite my long time on this committee, never really understood is rail banking as a whole. It's to me, a rather complex topic, but I understand it takes the teeth out of an awful lot of the problems that you have with potential land claims and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll be honest, my understanding is on the surface as well, not a very deep understanding. I think some of the benefit is that Pioneer Valley Railroad retains ownership of the land, which means the town is not actually acquiring. We're not taking ownership. You know, it's not like buying a piece of real estate for yourself or buying a new home. You're not maybe taking ownership of the deeds or things like that. But I think because they remain owners, they're kind of leasing or letting us rent the land. And there's a time frame associated with it. They won't touch it for 99 years or something like that. So if they intend to go back to rail, it won't be for that duration of time, which allows us to use it in the time being. So it sounds as if we're renting the lands for a century or so, with a fairly good expectation that with the investment of not only our town, but all the surrounding towns, Pioneer Valley Railroad won't turn around and remove the progress of the recreational paths along that corridor.
I think part of the rail banking is if they reclaim the land, they have to somehow reimburse us so that we can recreate a trail in another way.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good piece too. But yeah, it's the additional terminology that I don't totally know as to why somehow this does not require the town to try to, go any eminent domain type of land takeover type of thing. But I'm hopeful, yeah, the legal folks can then manage the, oh geez, I'm forgetting the names, but any of the current abutters, or what's the phrase I'm thinking of, where there's pieces of land that the abutters may have. What was it?
Is it an access road?
No, the lands that were acquired against, a taking of the land.
Yeah, there's a phrase, and it'll come to me, and for some reason I continue to blank on this name, but either way, yeah, it makes that transaction a bit simpler. And yeah, I supposedly it's easier than a town outright buying the land, which is somehow a different process and different funds are required for that sort of thing.
I spoke with Mike Bueller when I came on because I didn't understand it. What he said is, without that, almost every single prior relationship with the abutter would have to be renegotiated between the town and the abutter, and some go back to the 1880s or 1870s and trying to chase that down. And this just, by having the rail banking, it's not an issue because the railroad still has a standing agreement. The original agreement is still there, so you don't have to renegotiate any of that.
Right. Yeah, so it takes a lot of the onus off of us in the town, and it allows the transaction to go more smoothly. I realize that's a very unofficial way of stating its usefulness, though it does appear to be useful and potentially in our favor for transitioning from dormant rail to a useful recreation path. I don't know if that's an adequate answer, but hopefully it helps address maybe why the transaction style is a bit different.
Part of this is hopefully the lawyers are going to finalize this process by the end of June, because that's when our grant runs out, the acquisition money.
Right, actually, so that's a good point. So I want to double check with Ed to see what the status there is, because it sounded as if the last time we spoke, it sounded as if he was able to request an extension, or that he wasn't worried about the chance of an extension. But really, if we can get our ducks in a row and not have to rely on an extension and make it appear as if we are making progress there, then I think that would be favorable no matter what. I'll make that my follow-up note too, to check on grant fund usage and deadlines.
Related to the grant that we put in, do you know if the town actually started the process for the RFQ?
That was going to be another item to discuss, because the RFQ has dates. I think the dates went from February to March, and obviously now we're in March, and the RFQ has not been made official or has not been published. So that was something that I wasn't really sure how we would approach next. I don't know if what we have is good enough to be published and sent out to firms to consider, or if more information was necessary. I'm not in the field to know if this is, standard documentation or if other information is needed. That was maybe something Dan could speak to, or Ed or the town. If they know the RFQ is ready to go, then we could publish, I suppose, but I'm not sure the status of it.
Okay. Yeah. I had it sounded like Ed felt comfortable submitting, and even if we didn't get grants, I was a little concerned about the potential time lag between when we put it out and we don't get grant money for a year from now, a year and a half from now, or 2.5 years, if that that was going to backfire on our relationship with.
Yeah, and grant funds are of course helpful, but we also now can apply CPA funds, but how much of the CPA funds and what the actual budget looks like, and if more can be allocated from the acquisition line, maybe to a separate engineering and design line. I don't know, how much we have at our disposal to throw at this project before we run out of just CPA funds alone, and what else we can potentially rely on, or if it's going to come down to funds raised via grants, things like that.
So just a reminder, of the money that the town has put aside for the Greenway, there's about $100,000 over the acquisition that we sort of put up as a match for the Mass Trails grant. And that's, if it doesn't go through this year, that's still available to use in the future.
That also should be available for design and engineering. I think that was thanks to the phrasing used, so that it was acquisition and design or something like that. So there's some flexibility there. Which of course, I suppose we also don't know what the design will cost. So, taking the first step of getting that quote interest out there maybe gets us one step closer to what that fee could look like. And what else I'm interested in is if I would guess this comes from the end of the design work, but what the construction itself is going to cost, because I've heard from a few different sources that the engineering or design cost is about, I don't know, a fifth or some figure like that of construction, but I don't know what the construction costs are. So a lot of question marks.
This is the stuff that I've seen. The Mass TIP program has set aside $6 million potentially. Right. There was a study by Ty and Bond of just redoing the structure of the bridges and the culverts, and that was 1.3 or 1.4 million. That I assume is part of the bigger package. That's the numbers that I know of in terms of construction when I've looked, and that's above what I've seen published online for construction costs, but those were probably just flat areas. And when I spoke to Westfield, Easthampton, and this PVPC folks, and it's probably going to be in the ballpark of $600,000 for design.
Okay.
And maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what the process is, we have to follow the protocol for the Mass DOT, because the money comes through them and they have a very specific process. And there's a 25% phase of the planning, a 50, 75, and 100%. And probably 50 to 60% of the actual work is in the first 25% phase. And that's sort of what we maybe trying to get a first package of money to do with a consultant. So,
okay.
Just in terms of sharing what I think I know. So, and Westfield ended up spending $1 million for their downtown portion, the planning phase, the downtown portion of their trails, but they had a lot more negotiating to do with lights and
that downtown that's a very detailed infrastructure. And I mean, this could all vary based on overall length, number of intersections, et cetera, of course.
So that's the information that I have.
Okay, that's a good figure to plan for, though, even if it's very rough at the moment, but guesstimating 600,000 or so to move forward with is good to have in mind. I suppose that segues into another topic, which was Caitlin from the ad hoc committee. She had sent some links for potential grant resources. I think she questioned whether or not, the Greenway project actually qualified or not. My 2 cents is if anyone has the time or interest and can read, some of the backstory behind grant opportunities, I say we look into any and all opportunities just for the sake of obtaining money, towards the project. And related, Ed recently sent an email to committee chairs about the American Rescue Plan Act. I think this is probably unrelated to the Greenway project. The Greenway project seems like a bit of a luxury as opposed to, I don't know, emergency services for the town or something like a COVID response services or something like that. But I figure at the very least we should review the terms, see if there's opportunities there, and then as we find additional grant resources moving forward, we could just email the committee members, I believe, review if it's worth trying for, and then gather documentation and work towards a submission if there's interest there. And of course, the ad hoc committee is a pretty good resource on that too. But I just figure as long as we keep that dialogue going, we can continue to apply for any money that may be available.
So I did a little research from what the ad hoc committee had sent us. They listed the Rails to Trails national agency. They only give out grants under $10,000 or $15,000. So it may be something when we have a specific build, when it's done and we want to do a signage or
right, yeah,
disability stuff. So it's not going to be usable at this phase in terms of the amount and probably the function.
Yeah.
The other one they mentioned was the RAISE grant. I'm not sure how much of it really fits, but I think there is if we're going to do it, I think that submission is within like a couple months from now, April 14th. So I will get back to people on that. I did start to look at it. Okay.
Okay.
And the RAISE, it's discretionary transportation funding. And it's called the RAISE grant or View Grant Opportunity. So if I can try to figure out if there's a way to forward this to people or links to
What's it targeting?
It's part of the Rebuild American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. So it's not necessarily their primary focus, but if you talk about sustainability, if people using bikes rather than cars, we probably can make a point of that.
Okay.
And I don't really know if they're giving more money to states rather than localities. I can't tell from the limited information.
Yeah. I mean, it's always good to look into the details, see if the juice is worth the squeeze, and then see what we might have for paperwork already ready to go. And if it's not a heavy lift to at least throw your hat in the ring, then maybe it's worth it.
Okay. I will do some work on that.
Excellent. Yeah, I figure it never hurts. Let's see. And then I think I also shared with the group, I could be wrong about this, but it was maybe a month or so ago, there was an annual town report. Pretty simple. It was a one-pager, just kind of summarizing 2021 major complications or accomplishments. I think I sent in, I think I forwarded what I sent in, which was kind of just a brief listing of accomplishments and what we'd done, mostly around funding. If you haven't seen that, feel free to let me know. And then one other thing that continues to come up, we haven't really had a solution on it, but not the end of the world. It's just our general marketing, notifications, social media presence. This is always open to ideas. I'm on the fence about it. I think social media is generally the way information is shared now, but that's a big, social media has big pros and cons all at the same time. And it's if one person manages a social media outlet, it can be a heavy task with, constant interactions or as much input as someone would like to manage. But otherwise, right now, our presence mainly exists around just one email address. So we get inquiries occasionally. So I'm responding to inquiries as they come in. But otherwise, yeah, I'm open to input, ideas, and ways to tackle this if anyone feels strongly about presence or a site or any other format, of course.
How often do you get inquiries?
Not often. Coincidentally, I did get one today. But otherwise, it's more responses to us reaching out to towns or other folks who've been involved in the path creation process. Not a ton of Southampton residents asking about the status.
Is it like once a week, once a month?
Once a month, and that may be generous. I'd have to go back and check, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is whether or not we should be attending events in surrounding towns. Just to maybe learn a little bit about what mistakes that they might have made, difficulties that they're encountering in their towns. Some of it is relevant to us and some of it is not, but I mean, we're going to be connecting with Westfield, and the connection is kind of in flux right now, and they're thinking it's going to go along Route 10, but maybe not. It's going through a low-income residential community, but people are objecting.
It's been very interesting seeing that unfold.
Yeah. So I just sort of feel like it would be nice to have our finger on the pulse a little bit and see what's going on in surrounding towns. It was helpful, when we had that guy from Westfield show up at our the meeting that we had at Conan Park. Yeah.
So in preparation for the Mass Trails Grant, I did speak with Jeff Bragg from Easthampton, who's the city planner, and he wrote a letter of support for us and would like to know what we're doing. And I've sort of let him know he's submitted the grant and thanked him. And Mark Crissati is the town engineer. He's the one who's been organizing and sent us some emails, the Westfield effort. Mm-hmm. And we sort of said we'll keep him in touch. And then Dan Call is the sort of nonprofit person from Westfield and the Columbia.
Yeah, Dan's been great. Dan has been probably the most proactive with me, actually. He sends emails all the time, but he uses my personal email address, so he's a great contact. And they've also they have invited me, and maybe I should have done a better job of sharing with the group, but he's pointed out meetings that they have, and it sounds like they're meeting in person more regularly, which is always an option for us too, by the way. But so I actually did attend a meeting in Westfield probably a month or a month and a half ago, and I want to say maybe it's their Friends director, Carmel Steiger. She asked me to speak, and it was just during their public comment section, just to give an update on what Southampton has done, and again, some of the 2021 accomplishments. But they recognize moving forward this, I'm calling it phase 2 for us, but their, Mass Pike on-ramp north segment is of such heated debate and going forward with DOT that I think they want Southampton to be involved as the, receiving and partner end, but there's so many unknowns at the moment. And I think it will be for us too. It's a hairy area, and I don't know the right answer as to what will be best for both towns. But of course, they've been really good and open about, of course, if we wanted to attend, if we wanted to participate, and they're looking for input from us. And they're also more than happy to share what they've done and what they can offer for us to help expedite the whole thing. So I'll do that. I'll make a note to myself anytime I hear from Dan or any of those folks, and just share general information. If you want to attend, absolutely. But yeah, they're great contacts.
That'd be great. And then we can just, when we have our next meeting, whoever attends, whatever, can give a little update.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few folks who are really hot to trot about sticking to the rail lines, which would be excellent. But on the Southampton side, the rail line that continues south beyond Route 10, it goes along Brickyard Road, and it's just so darn close to so many residences that it's just going to be a real mess down there for I think maybe it's 2 miles or so. But then once it opens up and it gets to the industrial area, I think that could be great. But it may differ from what they're looking at in Westfield. And I actually don't mind the idea of something more direct north and south, parallel to Route 10. But I think not having a separate, safe, family-friendly style of path that parallels 10, I think would be just a very poor solution. Not a solution, it would just be a poor choice. So I don't know what DOT thinks.
Two things related to that is, my understanding is the railroad is not willing to give up that portion of the rail because they plan to use it for storage.
Along Brickyard or closer to Westfield?
Actually, somewhere between Westfield and the Brickyard. I don't know the exact limits, but they were not willing to give that up.
Oh, okay.
So it was a non-negotiable.
In the area that
time.
you're thinking about, that's industrial,
Mhm.
in that area, the area that goes along Brickyard, they don't really care about that as much, but it wouldn't be worth developing that if you couldn't get through the area where they want to store their rails, their trains.
And the second part of that, when I spoke with Mark Rosati, the Westfield engineer who's been sort of working on the planning, their preference was to get it close to schools and low-income areas, so it'd be usable. And because I mentioned it in reference to Brickyard Road and Route Road being a quiet place. And he said he's aware of it, but that doesn't necessarily meet some of the needs that the town wants in terms of accessibility to the schools and other stuff. So it was not their preference at that time, earlier on, at least. That was before they had this, the feedback.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Of course, these aren't decisions that we can make that have any effect on our progress at the moment, but it's been an interesting topic. Okay, well, I think that's it. I think I just wanted to really prioritize this RFQ process because I think it's just our next natural step, and I think it only makes sense to really try to continue on with marked progress. So that seems like the next best thing to really tune into and try to get it published and available for any potential design folks.
I do have one sort of comment, thinking back about the where the legal stuff is going. Do the lawyers who are working on the rail banking agreement know about our timeline, and that if they finish their work by early June, it may enable us to have a grant, and if they don't, we won't get it? Are they aware of that? Because if they're not, we should make them aware of it, because they're just kind of dawdling along. They may think they have all the time in the world, but
we need to find the muscle then.
Yeah, I mean, just even if they already know, maybe if we just call and say, we're watching because are getting this grant, we've been told, requires this land banking agreement, rail banking agreement to be completed.
So historically, Ed has been dealing with the town lawyer, who represents works the Pioneer Valley Railroad.
My guess is that we would probably want to go through Ed. I wouldn't want to step over Ed and have him be insulted. My hunch is that the attorneys have a cost. They're probably working at the speed at which the town has invested in them. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just guessing it's not an open, I don't know. I have a fear that it's very expensive and they're doing what they're probably compensated for. But if maybe I can go to Ed and say, we do in fact have a timeline, let's maybe forward this along and say, our ideal goal is to, have this accomplished or completed by such and such a date to meet these goals. I wonder if he can forward that on without incurring either any more costs or compromising anything, or maybe he can do that and there's no money related. I'm not sure. But I'm happy to at least start with him and see if he can provide feedback on that front. He hasn't responded to my recent inquiry about the status in general, but it's a very valid point.
Yeah, I mean, it's the politicking, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a gentle poke.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. I never mind doing that sort of thing in my line of work anyway, but yeah,
there was like a lot of effort, not just our committee, but the grant writing committee. I mean, the people really stepped on the gas and got that grant submitted. There was a lot of people working together for it. It was really great, actually. But I would I don't know what, I just feel like
right, if it wasn't actually able to be used or brought to fruition, yeah, of course it'd be a tremendous waste, but I really hope nothing goes to waste, I guess, given it feels as if we built some momentum and that we are moving along. But if things do take this long and it compromises future funding, that would be very detrimental.
I mean, there is a chance we could lose. I think I've done other grants for the state, the land grant program for Wolf Hill, and if we hadn't met the deadline, we would have lost the whole program. Yeah. So, and I was working with this specific lawyer at 2 days before it was supposed to be finalized, and they were trying to make changes, and so we may need to push. We may need to make sure that we're not going to lose the money, because there's a chance we could.
I believe it has happened in the past.
We usually
we would have unless they completed the legal process.
If they think people aren't really paying attention and don't really care that much, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, you're right. We should stress this for sure.
They know that we really want it. There's enthusiasm, and we're also watching, and it's not just one person watching. It's like, two committees, the grants committee, the Greenway Committee, then I think it may, it's just the reality of the way people work, I think,
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm happy to go through it, but if you would like to give a call and check in, I won't hold you back.
There's a piece, actually, follow up from the grant we submitted. You sent me stuff to contact National Heritage and Endangered Species Program. I'll do that. You also got a letter back from the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Doric, the piece here is when we submitted the Mass Trails Grant, we had to write a letter to the National Heritage and Endangered Species Program and Mass Historical, saying that we were hoping to do this in their areas that may fit in their purview. So now we've got to respond back to them a little bit, but I was going to follow up with Ed on part of that. So I'll do my pushing about the grant also in that letter.
Yeah. I mean, part of the state really wants to make sure that these projects follow all the rules about, historic sites and the endangered species and all of that. And so, I think it's, so we submitted that to just show them that we were doing this in good faith, even though we're far from starting anything. But
yeah, makes sense.
It's an excuse for me to follow up with that also, just saying.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I don't mind. I think anyone who wants to either kick Ed's chair or gather more info, I mean, we can now show that we've got a pulse, we're interested, we want to get this moving. And I don't know the answer to this. I feel like the ability to use the construction funds, if they're earmarked for FY24, it's in the grand scheme of things really not that far off. So it's a piece of information that I don't know, but is it that we have to have a plan for it, or is it that we have to start using those funds, or how they actually come into effect? I'm not 100% certain, but all I do know is that FY24 is actually quite close. And I want to make sure that we're prepared with ducks in a row for the state, so that we can kind of keep the project rolling along, and not, if we were to surrender anything, it's not $6.5 million.
I spoke with Ed about that, and he was comfortable that that was flexible. And I actually looked up the TIP program, and we're listed in the TIP program for what they call a 2022 to 2026 TIP project ranking. That was published in 2/21. So that one does go through 2/26.
Okay.
And Southampton is listed without a date, but within that time frame.
Okay. I kept seeing FY24 maybe as a
Yeah,
maybe it was just in there as an average or a rough
I did.
project.
That's why I looked this up, and that one does have $6,080,000 listed as project cost estimate as of 2021.
Okay, good. So it's not like if we don't have shovels in the ground, money's going to disappear.
We don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it's something that I'm going to keep in mind and not give up on, but it's a significant amount of dough that we want to keep.
One other thing I wanted to mention, I spoke with from PVPC, last name is McCullough, and I think it's Jeff.
Jeff McCullough.
And he took a while to call back because it was around the holidays, but he was actually wanted to help us push this along. He was not as specific as I was hoping. He did say one of the things that's hardest to come by is the town funding for matches. So, and Ed was sounding like he wanted to use the $100,000 for the RFQ, even if he didn't have a match. This issue of how we maximize our town resources if we later need to go and ask for matching funds and can't get them. So just, I don't know the politics and what the right way to approach that, but I was a little concerned based of how to make sure we maximize, the town funding that's available. If we use this 100,000 now, we may have troubles getting matching grants for the next round.
I see.
So
okay.
Yes.
Chris Fowles has a lot of, she has a pretty good understanding of, all the complicated politics and how the funding runs. And, it may be worth checking in with her too about, if she has any suggestions for what we might be doing between now and June that might improve the chances of all of this stuff.
Chris is very good. Yeah, I shouldn't be volunteering for her, but I found that if you'd like to chat and get a true, honest answer, I've met her at Dunkin' Donuts. She seems willing to commit some time for face-to-face interactions. So that's a great way to get honest input and maybe some good direction without having to put commitments into text. But I agree, she's been excellent, and I wonder if she's got insight and advice as to the best way to handle these sorts of things.
And she also meets with Ed weekly.
Okay.
So
good.
It would be another put it
on their agenda.
Yeah.
So so if we have major expenses we're working on acquisition, design and engineering is coming up next. I'm not sure if anything follows engineering into the construction phase. Well, I suppose there's permitting. I don't know if there's permitting, licensing that adds up to much, but do you know of anything else where we would really want to be seeking out a substantial amount of match funds from the town?
Limited understanding, but I believe if we get the design completed, then the state Mass DOT comes up with the full package of construction.
Okay.
Yeah,
it does require town.
And the people who are doing the construction are the ones that get the permitting, right?
So the permitting would have to be done by the town.
It's done by the town, but we are not personally responsible.
Yeah, and that's part of the design phase, is the permitting, and that's
okay.
Part of that, the grant money we're getting.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are very detailed packages along the way that I'm interested to learn about. It's gonna be neat to see. The one small but not inadequate piece is little things like abutters and property owners who may feel conflicted about these sorts of things coming to or near their property. Things like privacy fencing, shrubbery, things like that, and what their property or nearby property could look like with the implementation of a paved pathway. And I'm interested in that too. How many abutters and how close they are and how much visibility they may have or may not want to the pathway. So I'm going to assume things like that are considered, and maybe there's alternatives offered to someone who may want clear access or may want a 20-foot tall privacy fence. I don't know, and whatever the maximum amount of privacy is, but I'm hoping that there's options to that regard along the way.
So two things related to that. In the Dropbox stuff, there is a list of all the abutters. And it's unfortunately it's a long list.
I think I saw a figure too.
Out of date but that list has been put together.
Okay.
And the second is part of the design phase process is requirement for town meeting with population and time for input of each phase. So you do a 25% phase and you need input from town members. So it's built into the process to get feedback from abutters and concerned town members. And that's part of what we can make sure that we're communicating when we get to the point of.
Yeah, this is quite I think it's an important task that we're probably going to have to undertake. And it is maybe something that we should put on an agenda for an upcoming meeting. How many people are there? What sort of outreach do we want to do? Do we want to, assign certain number of abutters per committee member and try to make contact and just ask them what what are their feelings about it? If they were to imagine the most ideal situation, what would that be? What are they afraid of? And just, how are we going to start that communication? I think, it's going to be, I think sometimes it's more efficient to do it in a big meeting, but that can also be overwhelming. And, there can be, a group of people that are either positive or negative that can kind of overwhelm the public meetings. And it might be a good idea to start with some kind of more individual outreach kind of early on, because maybe like that's been done in a long time.
I'm admittedly, I don't know if it ever has. Doric may know better, but I would imagine the project's been so far from that phase, so far from completion, that it may have been much too early to really have any solid information available to abutters.
It really probably isn't worth doing unless we get the grant.
Right. Yeah. There's much to figure out.
We get a grant, then we say, okay, it looks like it's rolling forward, and now we're about to start the design phase, and we want as much input as we can get from, not only the community that's going to use it, but the abutters, and make a special attempt to communicate with them.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in maybe in something like a survey. If we have a complete open-ended scenario, we may get an overwhelming amount of input back that will be, a fire hose amount of information that could be tough to manage. But if we lay out options that are reasonable and able to be implemented, then maybe that's something that can be traceable.
I mean, a survey is a kind of a more gentle way to introduce it, because you can also say, do you want to meet with one of the members of the committee? We're willing to come.
Or ask in writing. Actually, I think it may be better.
No, but if we send something, we send them out a survey with all these questions on it, and they can fill it in. And one of the questions could be, would you like to meet with one of the members of the committee to, express your thoughts or see, get some information about what's happening?
Yeah.
As an early, but it's a little bit premature to, hash that out. We may want to sort of hold that as a thought for if we get the grant or when we get the grant.
And we would want to talk with a consulting firm also to make sure we're not
Duplicating.
fact-finding their making it harder for them to complete the process. So
Right.
work
Yeah, we're definitely not the first ones to address this and obviously manage concerned citizens. So it's just been an interesting piece that's come up for me recently. So I always have it in mind, but I do realize it's several steps down the road.
Yeah, that they can come up fast.
Right.
It's sort of like you just don't want people saying, well, nobody ever asked us about it, and then getting mad and stonewalling it,
Yeah.
Which
No,
happens. We've seen it happen in a lot of towns.
Yeah, no, that exact topic has kind of come up with something unrelated, but going on in my neighborhood recently, where a lot of people aren't aware of what's happening. But I was kind of thinking, like, how or when should we start sharing progress, and really we can offer a big picture to residents now, and that's sort of where I tend to lean to. Okay, well, maybe we do need either a website or a social media post or something, just with a very broad summary of where the project is. But yeah, we're very far from knowing when is this going to happen, when is the path going to be constructed, when is the town throwing money at an agreement, whatever it may be. There's some things that we don't have the specifics of, so I don't want to paint us into a corner or make any promises that just aren't known just yet.
Mm-hmm. I just shudder when I think about what it would be like if we had a social media post that any one of us was fielding. I just don't even really want to go there, but posting like an update maybe in I don't know what people read. The Reminder, that trashy thing, Robert Floyd's paper, the Gazette, town meetings. But I think that would be something we might want to think about and talk about. It's, we have time to do it, but I think it would be a smart idea if we start something like that. And the other thing is, like, what is there is there any money for the 50? We talked about
the Friends of the Greenway.
The Friends of the Greenway, yeah. And is there some fund that they had? Somebody said that they.
Well, no, the real question was whether we could later channel funds through a 501c3 or.
Yeah, it's been an absolute black hole. I can't find any information on it.
So, but that can be recreated if we down the line. That again is a piece when we actually have a project being built.
They raised a lot of money and somebody took off.
No, I don't think they raised any substantial money.
Yeah, that's the thing. Who knows if it's pennies or if it's a substantial amount. I looked into the process of how to start a 501c3. It's not unobtainable. It's just enough administrative hassle that I'd love to not have to recreate it if it's already been established. If the channel exists, let's just keep the bank account rolling, even if it is just pennies in there. But the thing is it was created and managed by the Friends group, and I've got a few names of past Friends members, some who were involved, and once I reach out to them, they say, I don't really have anything, and I didn't do that, and so nothing's really come of it. But my naive expectation is that a 501c3 account really should be the ownership of the town, unless it's set up or applied for as the. So would the nonprofit ownership, technically, quote unquote, owners be the Friends group?
Yeah.
So the town has no access.
Edwards Library, the town doesn't own that money, right?
Okay.
That's right. That's a distinctive silo that's put around the money and all that. The idea is that by virtue of not being a town entity, you have considerable flexibility that a regular town entity like us just doesn't have. For one thing, you can actually have money. And the other side of that is that the town can't go reach in and get it. Nothing like that. So you can do pretty much whatever you like with your funds. You're not held to any standards such as, multiple bids for some task being undertaken, something like that. So the money actually belongs to a state chartered corporation.
Interesting. See, I was actually thinking it would be accessible by the town for whatever the project was related to. Okay.
No, about all they have to do is if the town said, gee, we could use some of that, they can politely go ask the 501, and presumably a check will get written.
That's interesting. So I wonder what happened. If anyone actually took off with it, or if it's just sitting there collecting dust.
I'm not sure if there's ever much money there. The question is whether the structure was there.
Yeah.
You know, every year you have to file the Form 990 if you're a
Yeah.
nonprofit
So
under 50,000 annual revenues. And I believe the 990 becomes a public document. If that is correct, then it should be quite transparent, and it should be quite possible to go dig in and find out what the bank balance had been each year of a filing.
You called it, excuse me, a 990?
the tax form?
Yeah, 990 is the form that you have to put in when you are a small 501. It comes in different forms, but the point is that you are at least accountable to that degree. You have to report once a year to the federal authority how much money you've taken in. And that's about as deep as the transparency goes, to the greatest of my awareness. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, but that is actually a way that you could find out whether or not there really was funds there, right? If there's no 990, if there's no evidence that the Friends of the Greenway have any fund like that, then, you know.
It also could be that they stopped filing it so it's no longer present anyhow.
That is possible. If they abandoned the effort, then from the federal point of view with IRS, they give you 3 years of being kind of a slob. And then after a while they say, hey, are you gonna make this a real thing, or are we just gonna drop you from our rolls? And if they don't hear from anybody, you're as good as gone as far as the nonprofit status is concerned. The thing that you lose is the nonprofit recognition by the Fed. Now, on the state level, it's the state that grants the charter for the actual corporation to exist. And I haven't yet seen one way or another what happens within the state if you suddenly just fluff and don't do your duties. But then again, your duties to the state are practically nothing, really. So I suppose the state might not even know if a 501 has come and gone.
I have that information, actually. I just looked it up.
Looked it up.
So there was a 50, there's a 990 that was filed for the Friends of the Greenway. Jen Robert was the president in 2019. And it says Friends of Greenway is a public and societal benefit raising funds for and distribution in Southampton, Massachusetts, which was founded in 2015 and has an unknown amount of revenue and number of employees. So we have a little bit of information.
Did you say founded 2015?
Founded in 2015.
Oh, found.
That's
And
more recent than I
as
thought.
of 2019, it was still in some form.
That
Most
seems
recent
kind of
one was
late, but it's
December
possible.
2018.
Interesting.
It's got General Bears' name on it.
Gosh, I haven't seen Jen in ages. I'd honestly forgotten the name.
And I had called her and didn't get a call back from her, so I can follow up again.
I almost want to say Michael told me that she'd moved away. I could be completely mistaken, but she may not be in the area at all.
Mhm.
My very limited recognition of all of this comes from a video. There was a link to a very old video, and I thought it was pre-2015, but I have no idea. And there was 2 women, and they were talking about their, what they'd done for the Friends group, and they actually state we've created a 501c3 to start raising funds. And then they went on to say they were hosting a bike rodeo and maybe some kind of youth-oriented type of events. So I know something was done, whether or not, funds came of it and were actually deposited into account. I have nothing in text after that, but I heard that and I said, like, oh, well, we got to have access to it, bring it to life, and at least just keep it there. So it's an asset for us if we can contribute.
That's what I'm trying to figure.
2011, $20,000.
I'm not sure if it's the right group.
Friends of the Greenway.
20,000.
Well, I
Too good to be true.
Friends of the Greenway, Inc.
No, that's not Southampton Greenway. So it's a different
Oh,
one.
okay.
Okay, no. So we don't have any more information, but it did exist at one point.
Well, keep sleuthing.
Have you met Tammy Walunas yet? She was very much involved.
I have emailed with her, and she also said she had no info and said she wasn't able to help any further.
I think
I was surprised.
Susan McNamara, I think, may have also been involved. I'll call her.
Gosh, I wonder who the treasurer was. In the state document, when you first set it all up, you have to name every officer. And there's a limit to the size of the slate that you can't go below. You have to name a president, you have to name a treasurer, and you have to name a clerk, and then you can make it thicker than that if you want to. It has never been clear to me how profoundly you're supposed to maintain that roster with the state. That's become a problem for us in Friends of Open Space. Our roster has shifted completely, except for me. And I'm trying to find out what it is that you have to do to see to it that the state knows. But the point of bringing it up is, at least at the time of filing the documents with the state, the slate of officers was established and named right down to addresses, and I think even phone numbers.
I'm just trying to see if they have any more information.
Anyway, we can
No,
sleuth
we
it out.
can sleuth it out, but okay.
I actually, so I'm just looking now, I have an email from 2016. I think this was maybe roughly the time I moved to town, when I was kind of poking around to see how I could get involved or just learn about the status of the path. And I got an email back from Tammy stating, let's see, they try to meet monthly at the library. They're looking for a new president for the Friends group. She was the secretary and Jen Roberge is the treasurer. But things had kind of stalled out. And then that was it. And I just said, okay, well, keep me in the loop. I want to learn more. And then let's see, we emailed again because she said she saw action from the committee on the select board meeting in early 2022. So obviously that time span, I think not a lot happened on either fronts. But then, yeah, I got back to her and asked about 501c3, and I think she tried to loop in Jen Roberge, which the email address was not working, and then nothing really came about after that. So I got no helpful information back afterwards. So
anyhow, no further information now. So,
Wow.
to be continued.
I was only gonna say, somebody might have a checkbook just sitting around then. And as for the signatory authorities, you have to sign a signatory card with the bank. We wouldn't necessarily know which bank, but a fair guess is it's going to be ESB. It may be possible just to ask. That may not be private, protected information over at the bank. I'm willing to do that.
Sure, it'd be interesting.
Not a bad idea.
Come up with.
Okay, I will put that down as signatory question mark. I had to go through that process a year or two ago when we were setting up for FOSUS, which is why it is familiar. And gosh, sometimes it's a little bit scary almost to realize you can have a checkbook with pretty significant funds in it. And, there's pretty limited accountability in a Friends.
Yeah.
It's just a teeny weeny private little corporation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're counting on people to be good fiduciary responsible persons, or whatever you call us.
Yeah.
the one thing I think we may need to move on quickly is decide whether they're going to do this grant. I think if we're going to do the raise grant, it's going to take all the time we have. I think the process is that you have to do a first application to get listed as an agency and then get an application. So Aaron, if it's okay, I will talk to you into the grants chair.
Yeah, and can you send me either a link or if you have a page of, just so I have it in the latest and greatest email so I can look into it.
I absolutely will do my best to recreate that because I pulled this up a couple of weeks ago. I think I can do it.
Should be on
Yeah,
there.
it shouldn't be out there. Yeah, okay.
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 All right. Any other thoughts or concerns, priorities, or are we good to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I second
Sounds
Third.
good. It was a pretty unofficial meeting, I think, on that front. I never
it.
do well
Yeah,
with Robert's
quorum.
rule.
I mean,
There you go.
We
Better than nothing.
we voted to open and we voted to close. That was
we got, you
official.
know, we've got some work to do.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.